Aloha! And I'm here with Miss Hailey Jones, a comedian extraordinaire and clown. I was hearing more of about your clowning earlier today. A professional elf, a murder mystery writer,
Yes.
and a lover of mysteries of many, many kinds.
Yes.
Life is full of mysteries. And you have come to the right place.
Yes.
Because this is Lex White's Love of Mysteries podcast. We're going to be covering things great and small. Who knows what we're going to get into?
Yeah.
We're here in the beautiful Abahale, and it's a space where we're going to have some background noise and some liveliness in our surroundings, and I am hoping that will contribute to a lively conversation.
Yeah.
And an attitude of openness and public discourse,
Absolutely.
rather than feeling like we're in a sterile, silent studio.
Which is mysterious in its own right.
Yes. Well, Miss Hailey Jones, you are a talented person of many different kinds of creativity.
Yes.
But would you like to share with people a little bit of your background as far as how did you get into esoteric ideas and things about dreams, things about the realities that human beings experience beyond our regular waking reality?
Absolutely. Well, I guess you could call me a clairvoyant. I've always had a really deep practice with dreaming. When I was a kid, I wasn't always clear on what was dreams and what was reality, and my mom blurred those lines even more, being like, that never happened. And I'm like, I think it did, or maybe it was a dream. I don't know. But as I've gotten older, I've started keeping a dream log, and as I've become more conscious of my dreams and the patterns of them, and, recognizing different premonitions, like when you have that feeling of deja vu, now I can just look it up in my dream log. Or if I felt like I had a conversation with somebody, I could look it up to see if that happened recently, like I interacted with them in a dream, or if it was that. So that's really helpful. I think, when I had kind of a spiritual opening in 2012, and I started being able to gain terminology for a lot of the things that I experienced when I was younger. So I was very aware that I had dreams about past life relationships with different cousins. And, as a kid, I didn't have words for those sort of things, and they were still had equal intensity as to the dreams I have now. But now I know how to process them more.
I am very interested in the idea of dream journaling, which is a practice that I've heard is very powerful and a very good way for people to get into kind of more bringing their dreams into their waking consciousness, and also to begin having more lucid dream states. The people who are interested in lucid dreaming or dream journaling, if you're someone who's been successfully doing it for a long time,
Yeah.
I've tried to do it where I've just kind of done it for a week and I just never have been able to establish that habit in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have any advice for people about getting into dream journaling and the benefits of dream journaling?
For sure. Yeah. Well, a lot of people usually, when I am in conversation with them, they start with, I don't remember my dreams at all. So if you're starting from there, start setting the intention to remember your dreams. Drink a little bit more water before bed so you wake up more frequently, which is more likely that you'll interrupt a sleep cycle so that you might have access to those dreams. Now, I'm not very legible in writing when I wake up, so my dream journal is actually in my phone. So I just kind of turn over and I just hit the keyboard. We have it all so down these days. I hit the keyboard to whatever I can remember. Sometimes it's storylines, sometimes it's just, symbology, sometimes it's the people. Whatever comes out, comes out. And you have to be careful because sometimes your keyboard might switch to the emoji keyboard and then you're never going to make sense of it. But I find that that's a really useful tool to do it that way, because then it's already, you don't have to go through and organize it or index it. It's in there. So if you have a deja vu moment, you can search for, like the key things that are triggering it. And then you can be like, oh, I did have a dream about this.
You can find your symbols.
Yes, absolutely. And you can start to see the bridge between our dream consciousness and our waking consciousness that do start to loop forward. And the deeper you practice this, the more vivid your dreams become, the more you'll understand your patterns. Like, I think a clear pattern for me is I realized that I always dream about snakes on new moons, almost every single time. And, usually it's a very symbolic snake dream or whatever. And then it's like more mountain lions and bears near full moons. So, you just notice these little symbols, or you can also you're like, man, I had a volcano dream. I know many years ago what was going on in my life during that time. And then you go look in your dream journal, you see the date, and they're like, oh, well, that was when I had my arm amputated. I don't know why that's the example that came through, but
you obviously have not had it.
I have both of my arms at this time. But then
past life, perhaps.
Right. But then you can get ready that your other arm's about to be amputated or whatever it means. Yeah. So it's a very beneficial practice. And I know for me, it helps deepen my understanding of how I connect to people at the soul level, how I prepare for things in my life. And you can really get ahead of the curve just by kind of understanding the symbology of your subconscious. And, the more you bring that into light, the faster you transmute things, the faster you move through phases that might otherwise keep you stalled.
I think it's really important to think about humanity communicates in symbolic language very, very often. And when we look at the ancient writings of people, the most common kinds of ancient writings were kind of like the Egyptian hieroglyphics. We would see Mayan ideograms, Chinese ideograms.
Right.
The earliest forms of writing were often trying to just capture something symbolically and represent it.
And now we just have the poop emoji.
Yeah, now we have poop emoji. So now but back in the day, we still have the letter M, and that comes from the Egyptian letter Mem, which eventually goes back to their word for water. So they drew it as more squiggly lines than we draw, but our letter M is actually it's waves.
Yeah.
On water. So we do maintain these symbols, and human beings are very apt at communicating in symbols and at interpreting things in symbolic language. So that's very common. You see it in acting and cinema and in theater, in our storytellings in fiction, though in music. The various symbols that we use are ways that we are able to communicate something that's not quite communicatable. We can indicate something that's much larger than our words can indicate. So that's the idea of the finger pointing at the moon. You don't really want to be looking at the finger as what the true meaning is. The moon that you're indicating is so much greater that the indicating finger is just supposed to point someone to the moon. And one of our struggles perpetually in human life is, how do we find a way to communicate when we have such a faulty communication system, which is one that I can only give you fingers pointing to the moon with my words. They point to something, and I have to trust that you understand them because they point to the same or similar idea in your mind, but they don't always point to the same or similar ideas. And so you get various levels of misunderstanding that come out of the improper or unskilled use of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think words can be utilized as a tool to help us, like as we evolve. I know for myself in the last 12 years, like my ability to like instantly, it's almost like I get files in my brain sometimes. And, dreams can be like that, but language can also activate that. I've been working with this astrology teacher, a mentor, and I don't know much about astrology. And even when he talks astrology, it just like, it doesn't go in one ear and out. It goes into my being as if it's a file being downloaded. And while I don't understand the astrology, it's the symbology of it that then unlocks like a part of my consciousness that I previously wouldn't have been able to access. So, words can be like little tools or keys that activate things within us. And sometimes I think as we're evolving in our collective consciousness, there was a great podcast called The Telepathy Tapes, and it talked a lot about, it's still going on, but about parents who have nonverbal autistic children. They're like, my kid can read my mind. And they all thought they were crazy because a lot of times these are very religious families or very scientific based families. And then they're having these experiences with their children that are blowing their mind. And then they're connecting with community that's all like, oh, we're having that experience too. And so, those of us who may have leaned more toward the mystic realm or just, have some of these gates or practices already, like that's a normal thing. But if the words are a part of unlocking, we can receive a full thought versus getting trapped in like, oh, we could have misunderstood. You could say moon and I could get the whole image of a time that you were running under the moon naked on the beach being like full moon, and all you said was moon. I was like, oh, I got your full story, thank you. And we can start to do that if we get really intentional with that. And again, that's what the dream journaling can help with, because it's again bridging, this realm of kind of deeper communication. I've had dreams of people who were in pretty dire states, and I knew in the morning that I had to reach out to them. And, I just be like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh, I'm so glad you reached out. I was having a really rough, and they open up in a way that they may not have if that invitation that came through the dream space hadn't been made in the physical.
I think that so much of the value of something like astrology or something like tarot is that it has these archetypal symbols that they're so well crafted in or understood. I'm not sure if like tarot was invented or if it was discovered, basically, because are these archetypes things that kind of already were there, that people just intuited that these energies are there and then put a name to them, the Three of Cups, the Empress, or whatever. But the archetypal energies of them, the things that they are describing, are pretty low-level intuitive to the world. And a lot of the times when we're talking about an abstract system of astrology or tarot or something like that, these are methods through which we can filter and understand the world in terms of these symbolic archetypes and use them as like little building blocks, or almost like linguistic Legos. No, there's like, we're using tarot can be used as kind of a hieroglyphic language to describe any kind of life pattern or life experience.
Yes.
And when we're talking about our dream states, so much of that seems to me to be similar to that, where the energies of our thoughts and patterns are being manifest in recurring archetypal images that are shared between many people. For example, people have this one common dream that people might have is a dream of their teeth falling out. And someone has told me, I don't know that this is what it means. I'm just saying that someone has told me that a dream of your teeth falling out means that you feel like you're not in control of your life.
Oh.
Or a dream of showing up to school and you're not wearing pants.
Yes.
Like classic, what Freudian, Jungian dream archetypes. What are some dream patterns that you've noticed in your dream journaling? What are some recurring themes that pop up again and again for Hailey Jones?
For myself, I mean, I mentioned earlier about the snakes, mountain lions. There was Black Panther theme for a while that had a lot to do with like wrestling with other people's shadows. I think for me, the way that your subconscious is going to find the language that works best for you. And I work a lot with nature symbology and animal medicine. I've also dreamt of tarot cards, and it will get really specific images in dreams of tarot cards and know that that's just, it knows how to communicate through that language. I've also used tarot cards to help discern what dreams are about or why, like if I'm doing a reading with somebody and they've been stuck on a dream or having like a reoccurring nightmare, we can break it down through tarot cards and use that as a key to open up a shared language of the subconscious. The different decks and cards can activate so many different things, based on what they inspire or how you connect with them. And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, you can always use a dream journal or ask for the classic interpretations, and that can be helpful, but really it's what does it mean to you? And how does that come through? And that's an important way to not only get to know yourself better, but if you're having dream circles or, I am frequently the person that people email or send a text to and are like, hey, I had this crazy dream. Can you help me break it down? And then we'll go through it together. And again, that's a part of the activation that, a dream or a good story or a good song can bring through to deeper express our own consciousness.
One thing that I've often reflected about dreams is that dreams, we have this tendency to dismiss dream realities as being a type of reality that is not real. But in a certain sense, I almost feel like our dream reality, maybe it's not more real than our waking reality, but it's of equal substance. It's of a different kind of substance in terms of its like persistence in like we can close our eyes and open our eyes again and we see these things are still here, but our dream realities might be more amorphous, but they are something that represents real powers and real energies if something exists in a dream, then we could say that thing exists. It just exists in a dream. And it's not that it doesn't have an irreality to it. So one thing that we're recording this podcast before, and we had a little bit of interruption about that, but we were talking about the nature of consciousness and the nature of conscious energy, where I was thinking of consciousness as almost being like, these bodies don't seem to me to be the generator of consciousness, but more like they are a transceiver of consciousness, transducer of consciousness, or somehow like the broadcast signal is out there and this radio tunes into the right frequency and manifests that. And the dream reality is kind of out there in the broadcasts. The physical reality is in here connected with our bodies, but it's almost like our body is the dream consciousness self being pulled down or manifested or transduced into a physical reality being. Do you have any thoughts about that? We were talking about kind of spiritual entities and ghosts on my previous podcast. And I know that I kind of brought that up with you before. So.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of ideas going on there. Trying to figure out which thread I want to pick up on. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of close, I guess, the dream thread, the more you dream, the better you get at dreaming. And so, to go back to even your very first question for me, there was, so in, I don't know what tribe, but in Native American culture, there was a term called the Heyoka, which is the sacred clown.
Oh, that's right.
And how the sacred clown would become the tribal clown is that they would receive a dream from the thunder gods. And then they would, in front of the whole village, have to act out the dream as a part of the tribal medicine, as a part of their initiation rite. So that's kind of like the path of the Heyoka. And I really resonate with that term. It's not mine to use, but I feel like there's a reason my name is Hailey, and we've got Heyoka, we've got Ha, that all ties in with the comedic portion. But what I love about that, near the time, I think it happened before I learned about the Heyoka, but I started having dreams where I could feel my body physically in the dream. So if I was running, I could feel my feet on the ground. I could feel the grass beneath me. It became a sensory quality even within the dream state.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times in dreams, we're having the visceral component, we're having an emotional component, but that's about it. In the last couple years, I've started to smell in my dreams. So my senses are starting to get activated in that realm. And for me, I just feel like it's, and I haven't read about what that means or anything, but my understanding is I feel like I'm accelerating my own life and my own timeline by being able to have more consciousness in different realms. So, as we grow and expand, we start to be able to project. Like, imagine if you went into a meditation and you saw yourself in a meadow in India and you had an incense burning, that you would start to become more and more lucid, that almost you project your entire consciousness into that visualization so that your body becomes able to feel and experience in that simultaneously. And so as that ties into ghosts and, other realms, I think, in the last year, I've started having dreams of other, I had a fairy, a genie. I met a selkie, which is a half woman, half seal. I didn't even know what that was. I woke up from the dream being like, what the heck is that? And Googled it and learned about it. And seals are one of my spirit animals. So I'm like, am I a selkie? Is that me? What's the story there?
Selkie. Selkies are very interesting.
Yeah. There's a really fun movie about selkies. Anyway, Ronan and Inish. I can't remember the title.
There's some great songs about selkies as well.
Also that, yeah. They're very mystical. Anyway, but tying all of that together, I do feel that as our collective consciousness grows and expands, we're going to be able to start to access more and more of those realms, especially the more pure of heart you can become, the easier it is to do that. And to throw it back to the telepathy podcast, it's the only podcast I've ever listened to, but they talk about like all the autistic children, they go hang out at this place. They call it the Hill, and they all have downloads, and across the world, maybe even galaxy, there's all this communication as to like what this is about and why it's happening. And I feel like that's a larger part of what's going on. Is I have a friend that sometimes will set the intention to dream together, and while we haven't had super lucidity around what happens in the dream, we'll be at the same place, and I was like, oh, I was with you last night walking by the beach, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I was by the beach too. I was boarding a boat, and I was like, oh yeah, you did do that, but maybe we didn't interact, but there was enough of that going on. So you can start to play with like how to meet your friends at different realms. I also think our consciousness itself will project to those, who need it, like I was sharing earlier.
Yeah. Some of the most powerful dream experiences that I've had have been experiences where I felt like I was meeting up with people. Mm-hmm. And I have not been able to independently confirm that And some of the issue is that everyone kind of has a little bit of difficulty bringing their dreams back to their body and remembering all those things, which is why dream journaling is such a powerful practice. But it's like, if I meet up with a friend in a dream, we did meet up in the dream or in a different plane of existence, in an astral plane or whatever. But if the other person doesn't remember it, then how can I know that we actually did? And it's not a projection of my own imagination and my own mind.
Sure.
And one thing or one part of the journey for me, as I've investigated shamanism and psychedelics and the altered states of consciousness that come through meditation practices, breath work, and things like that, there's an interesting question of how much of this is internal and how much of it is external. And then the real thing is, and what you get to in a lot of traditions, a lot of spiritual traditions, at the very core of them, is that is there a difference between as above, so below, inside and outside? Like, is my inner reality basically just a mirror reflection of the outer reality, and vice versa? So if I experience something inward, does that mean that there's an outward correspondence to it in some way? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily like, if in a dream I drop an apple, then me somewhere absolutely dropped an apple in the real world somewhere.
Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. An absolute, absolutely not. It does not mean that. Yeah. But what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it. I know for myself, just 2 days ago, I had a dream about a dear friend from high school, like, having died. And the dream was filled with all this weird stuff. But then I woke up and I got on a Zoom meeting, and the first person to share was like, my friend from high school died. And I was like, what? Like, where am I? Like, and was my dream about the person who I had associated in the dream, or was it about what that person was about to share? And I was just a little further down the timeline in the dream. I think, as far as like, is it me? Is it outward? I feel like that's a lot of intellectual thinking stuff, and more of what we're working on is ensouling. So I know there's a part of me that operates from the higher consciousness, and there's a part of me that operates from a more human consciousness. Right. And to my understanding, I feel like all of us are really working to ensoul more, so that we become truly souls in human bodies, not humans with souls, which is kind of how a lot of the world has been navigating for a long time. And I know for me, if I'm not engaging with somebody who, like, the more somebody is ensouled, the more at peace I feel with them, because usually that's the more like, yeah, I have this pattern, or like, this was the abuse I had in my child. And like, it's not weighted. It's just like, we're just sharing journeys and experiences and what we've gained. And we're sharing this as medicine. And sometimes it's a similar lesson, but we're all experiencing the same thing in different ways. But those fusions can only really happen if people have been doing the work. They've been meditating or dream journaling or, creating conscious art and deliberate, acts of healing for other people, have been trying to raise the vibe up, live from their heart center, live from their truth, from these morals, not just preach them. And I think, as you're talking about the word earlier, our words are spells. Like, these are such powerful tools that we have. And I'm, as a performer and as a storyteller, I feel responsible for what I bring into the world. And one of my biggest, I guess you could call it a shadow trait, is I believe everything that people tell me. I'm like instantly, not everything, I can intuitively discern what's real or not. But if someone says, hey, I'm going to do that for you, I take that as truth. And then when it doesn't happen, there's like this crumbling of expectation and and especially if there's no communication around it, or like words can be such a spell that dilute what it is that the reality is that we are all actually sharing. And I think for me, like, that's a part of like, is this all just a dream? Because that didn't manifest the way that it was spoken into existence. So it's a curious point to play with, and it's also a great reminder to be deliberate with your speech, and don't say things that are going to be hurtful or that you don't intend to do, because it's just wasted energy on both ends to invest in a reality that's never intended to come to be.
One of my favorite things to share with people about scripture and just in the famous magic words abracadabra is Aramaic. Abracadabra means I create as the word or as I speak. And when in Genesis, the book of Genesis, or the book of Bereshith in the Torah, in the Bible, it says that God created all of these things by speaking. So when God created light, God did not create it with his hands. God said, be light, and light is. And that's the way that God creates everything in Genesis, is by vibrating it into existence. So in Genesis, it says the ruach of God, the spirit or breath. The word, it means both breath and spirit. And the breath of God, I think it's marapahet. It flutters on the face of the waters. So the fluttering on the face of the waters, you can almost envision that someone's blowing across the surface of a cup of water and see the ripples that it would make. So God's breath flutters across the waters, across the deep of the great chaos of creation. And God said, be light, and light is. So then we read in John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was both part of God and also came from God. So these are like, to me, when you get to these root ideas that are there, these are extremely powerful ideas that tell us a lot about our reality, our individual lives, and how much we shape our lives by the words that we choose to use, by the vibrations that we choose to surround ourselves with. And I feel like my whole life path as a musician is someone who is learning to organize and harmonize vibration, and use that to create experience. So when I play a show for people and I play music for people, I am trying to create a shared experience with them through all of these things that are vibratory in nature. The information that I'm trying to get across to them, or the symbols that I'm trying to get across, are communicated through vibrational harmonies and vibrational mathematical geometrical principles. I just think it's like the universe is very, very beautiful. And when we talk about astrology, the stars and their patterns in the sky, they used to call that the music of the spheres because of their geometrical, mathematical relationships to one another. They exist kind of like the notes in a chord in a musical melody exist together. So, in what ways can we use our intentionality and our knowledge of the true power of word and the true power of our ability to express? How can we use that to help the world and shape our own realities and change things?
Yeah, I think it starts with just being intentional about what you're digesting. Not just, I mean, there's food, but, on the level of like, what are you scrolling on social media? Like, is that something that serves you? Like, what music are you listening to? What shows and movies? Do you need any of those things anymore? And paying attention, because, while sometimes it's really nice, to the window, to the walls, and to get that groove on, if you listen to the words of that song, it's pretty low vibes, and it might not be the reality that you want to create for yourself. I maybe like sweaty balls. I don't know, but whatever. But
there's a time and place for
everything. But anyway, can you tune into a frequency under that, which is about like the joy of the movement that song evokes, or
right.
And so there's different ways to tune in with things if you don't want to cut it out of your reality together. But I think it starts there, and then when you go into your own creation, you talk about music as a part of bringing everybody together. For me, it's the storytelling. It's the weaving of all the creative ideas within a room, or the vibrations within the room, and trying to like send a chord of light or joy or healing or understanding, a key, something. Like when I perform, it's like everyone, and I try to tune in on a subtle level with everybody in the room, so that like whatever it is I'm bringing forth somehow goes into their consciousness in a way that, you could view it as just inspiring laughter. But my intention behind inspiring any laughter is that it penetrates all the way down to the soul, or to the soul, so that it unlocks something. For myself, I created a show called Dead Dad Jokes, a literal stage of grief. And it was an alchemical comedy, that I wrote to help me process my own experience and even the mystical parts of how losing a parent is, it's a shift of your own vibrational energy, because part of them leaves this plane and a new part of you, it has to grow forward to fill that space. Or at least that's how I experienced it. And that's not a conversation that most people are having around death. And that didn't make its way into the show, but there's an intention in that of what that experience looked like physically. Now, that was my own processing of the grief, but the overall intention for the show was to help other people also be able to process the grief, and to offer the light in the darkness. Dark humor is a beautiful thing, because what it really shows is someone who has been an acrobat of the light and has gone to the depths of despair and can laugh about it. It's like, oh, I'm in the depths of despair. Like, how dramatic can I be? Like, what a fool I've been. and to use all of those phrases or that language, or, even just to make that dark joke, not as a deflection, but as a way to deepen into what the full experience is. And I think so much of how we use art, how we use words, how we utilize our dreams and start to integrate and weave all of this allows us to become more embodied. And the more we embody, the more that, while we can consciously do that, it's also just the vibration like you said with the scripture pieces, that radiates into the room and offers that healing without even having to try to do it all.
Yeah. It's very powerful stuff.
It is.
I mean, we have so much, the body of human work in terms of just how much dream energy was put into scriptures, stories, books, movies, music, television, plays, the passion, the energy, and it's not for nothing. It's not frivolous activity. This is critical activity, that something that I would like the kind of our society to understand a little bit more is the critical nature of the arts as sacred ways that catharsis and healing can be felt among the people. The ancient Greeks were very aware of the nature of the stage and the sacred space that was the area of the playwright.
Yes.
So when they were projecting their dreams onto a stage play, it was a ritualized drama that would bring about a cathartic release for the people in the forms of tragedy and drama that allowed people to contextualize and understand symbolically the great complications of a world that is highly irrational in their everyday ability to perceive and can be very confusing on all kinds of levels for everybody to just be out here. We're all going through it, and we're all struggling, and we're all just like having to make it. So understanding the ways that other people do that and putting ourselves in their shoes is almost like a ritual way of understanding, like acting as someone else, or playing someone else's song, or reading out someone else's poetry or their book.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting their thoughts, you're pulling them out through your voice. And that's a very powerful way to knit humanity's hearts together and bring us together as a people.
Yeah.
And help us find ways to be connected to one another.
Absolutely. I would say for myself, there's a couple channelers that I'll watch, and, they're channeling like this month's energy update, and their group of, celestial beings that speak through them. And I'm always kind of like envious of that, because what a great thing just to be able and like bring down spiritual truths. But then I've had a couple of reframings in the last couple months of just like, what I do is spiritual, so the playing the character whether it's my own character, the mask of what energy comes through in that is a transmission of itself, of its own kind of little guide. And it's also when we see theater, or even when we listen to music, it can take us into these altered states, for where just a brief minute, we're back into the state of what the songwriter was, why he wrote the song about XYZ, what you get to feel his heartbreak, or maybe you're re-experiencing your own through that moment, that couple of minutes. And, when I do murder mystery parties, it's like we pick a theme, we go into a world, and for 2 hours we're all in an altered state. Now it depends on your ability to hold that state as to how much you can gain, or whatever that. But sometimes I feel like that's a part of healing past lives, or bringing different dimensions through, or different wisdom. It is through that sense of play and through that art, which is really beautiful. And I think we often forget that art itself is a spiritual practice. That can tap us into such beautiful consciousness. And, it is, like, as you said, the universe is beautiful. And, the more I think we really listen and allow that stuff to infiltrate our being in its purest sense, as is for our highest good, like, the more medicine we can get every day from everything. I know this is silly, but I was getting physical therapy, and I always wear headphones when I'm in that, because they're always playing like modern pop music, and I'm like, what's not super healing for my body? You, me, I don't like your boyfriend. I'm like, that has nothing to do with me healing my body right now. And it's taking me to a completely different place. And so I put headphones in so that I can really focus on the thing. And so many people just aren't even like tuned into even that subtle frequency. And of course, some of us are just more sensitive than others, and that's fine. But like, it does make a difference. And if you make an intention to really like dive in, you can be rewarded in the process.
Finding the right space for our friends, our family, and just finding the right ways, or just finding better and better ways to connect with people is such powerful medicine for a world in which we're increasingly disconnected and increasingly almost prodded into polarity, prodded into like, take a side. Like, why don't you go over? What side are you on? Come on.
And none of that's real. We got to collapse the duality.
It's
totally.
It's very. It's very frustrating and very difficult. And I know that everyone really kind of understands this, like, on some level. Like, there's not anybody that I've talked to in our society that does not understand this on any side of the politics or whatever issues, but their way of like how much they identify with their team branding and how much they identify with their personal symbolic language and put it over the symbolic languages of other people is one of the ways in which we can figure out whether or not they're able to get along. So some of the, Martin Luther King Day was just the other day, and the judging people by the content of their character, well, it just means taking people as they come for what they are and what they're actually bringing. And they could be from anywhere or be anything, and what value they're bringing to your life can be found in the kind of symbols and language that they're willing to use and engage in, and the kind of stories that they want to tell about themselves and about other people. Sometimes people want to hear or tell stories that are just very horrific.
I was very curious as to what word you were going to drop into there.
Very terrible, horrific stories can be very addictive for people sometimes. And there's no harm in that. Like, you're a murder mystery writer, right? And there's something cathartic about.
Well, I don't really like or support murder. So for me,
right.
like, and this is where I was talking about with, you know, tuning into what frequency or what tune of even the song, you know, do you tune into the words? Do you tune into the beat? Do you turn into the vibe? Like,
Right.
and what becomes the dominant vibration? And, you know, for me, when I write murder mysteries, the dominant vibration is characters interacting. And I try to have, I recently wrote a mystery that I called In Denial, and it was about a boat that was cruising through the Nile, classic Agatha Christie vibe.
As you do.
But, you know, all the characters had something they were in denial about. And at the end, you know, they had some sort of like, they either chose to stay that way or they didn't, you know, and the lesson of it was just like, we're all on this boat together. You know, it was a spoiler alert for that mystery no one will ever read or do, but yeah, so it's a fun way to play with it, because I don't want to play in the frequency of murder. I don't, or blood or violence, you know. I want to play in the mystery of like, when is the wrong thing the right thing? You know, when is it right to bust the windows out the car? I don't know why I'm quoting all this pop music, but, you know, when is it the right thing to help like shift a timeline? Or, you know, there's a lot of play with that. And so that's something I really explore, is like, where's the moral component? And we're starting to see more of that. Like, you know, the more recent Knives Out movie, they hit a lot of like religious undertones. And anyway, there's many good ways of storytelling that can connect us to those different parts of the frequency.
I think it's very interesting to think about, like,
because it's not always the story that you tell, it's how you tell the story, I guess, is what I wanted to get to with that. So I personally, I love it when people open up about their childhood traumas and being, you know, I'm like, I'll listen to it, but it's how they tell it. You know, are they still in the victim consciousness of it, or they're like, here's, you know, and sadly we do gain things from our shadowy times. But, you know, can you, even when you're venting to someone, can you get to the part where it's like you're processing the experience so that you can make a different choice, so you can conquer the subconscious pattern in a different way? And I think that's, you know, for me, what I'm trying to always get to is deeper underlayers, so that we are telling it from more of a soul perspective, or like, you know, we're watching the movie and then processing it after, even if it is our own experience, sort of deal.
That makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense to think about, you know, well, how we get through these things. How we, you know.
Lost your thoughts in the thread?
Yeah. A little bit.
That's all right.
But
these are big concepts. They're big ideas. They're, you know, I think they're also, to go back to the astrology class I'm taking, like, you know, when I first started listening to that astrologer, it's Raising Vibration, Simon. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I kept listening to his YouTube videos because they just sat with me. But intellectually, I was not digesting them in a way that I'm used to processing. Yeah. And he offered this thing. He's like, if you want to come learn, or like, you know, need some assistance in navigating these transits, like, let's have a call. And I got on the call and I just said yes to his program because of the way that it infiltrated my soul, not because of what I thought that I could learn or what I thought it was going to bring me. I just said yes because, you know, and similar to how I would imagine some people might experience the way we're sharing on this thing. It's not all meant to intellectually be understood. Sometimes It's meant to wash through you as just, you know, like a song does. You don't analyze every note of a song, especially if you're not a musician. You just experience it. And I think the more ensouled people are and the more they start sharing from that place, you experience it. That my poems are that way. I get downloads like a poem, and then I'll read it and I'll like get high off my own poems. I'm like, ooh, that feels good. Like I didn't craft every word perfectly. It moves through me. And then when I share them, I'm like, cool. Like that was like a little invocation that can help everybody in one way or another. And that's super fun. Like, and yeah, sometimes I'm like, am I writing the same poem over and over again? Because there's such similar vibrations, but with new twists and new subtle frequencies. And, you know, that's part of the work.
Very often when I'm writing songs, I almost feel like the real work for me as a musician is getting myself out of the way and letting the thing manifest through me as I become an instrument for the divine in some way.
Yeah.
Like I let the music flow. My job is to remove all of the mechanical blocks between what comes out of the sound that comes out of the instrument, sound that comes out of my voice, and the story that's coming out. Remove all of the blocks of like mechanically my fingers and like of thinking about different things. The less I'm thinking about it, the better if it's flowing properly. And the stories themselves could come out. I've surprised myself in improvising songs and improvising stories in songs where it's like what happens in the song is like not something that I was consciously trying to manifest.
Yeah.
It's something that was manifested through me.
Yeah.
Or channeled.
Yeah.
And sometimes it definitely feels like a channeling. And I think that, you know, that's one of these things that makes me feel like what I was talking about earlier about consciousness being almost like there's the broadcast of our being is out there. The vibrational frequency is out there, and it's being pulled down here now into this being that I'm just here. But when this body stops, that's not any different than a radio being turned off. The radio wave does not disappear. The radio broadcast is not gone. The radio has simply stopped transducing the radio frequency from that electromagnetic radiation into the physical vibrations that's made by the speaker. So our relationship with death seems to me to be related to this idea of our relationship to our dreams and our relationship to our stories that we channel. It applies to me some kind of non-locality of consciousness or a consciousness field that is larger than any individual being. Do you have any thoughts about that and what maybe about life, ghosts?
We're covering it all today on Lex's Love of Mysteries. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I do think our consciousness is way bigger than ourselves, and yeah, I think that's a great example that you gave with the radio. As it relates to ghosts, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm at this place where in my life where it's just like ghosts, aliens, fairies. I'm like, why are we even doubting it? Like, it's so much easier for me to believe than it is to not believe. And because I think anytime we're creating this resistance, we're limiting ourselves to an experience. And I've been thinking a lot about that, even in the context of how we relate with different people. Some people are very closed and they don't want help, and they don't want to be working in their community or whatever. Like, they close themselves down, and to me, that's so limiting. And I think closing yourself down is different than creating healthy boundaries or a shield. Like, it's so lovely to open yourself to having these experiences with different realms or dimensions or whatever it is that we want to call it. And yeah, I think it's as it comes to ghosts, it's a different timeline that's kind of overlapping, or it's a way that a consciousness can reach through and be present with us in a way that they weren't able to be before.
I think there's something definitely, this is something that I kind of wanted to revisit from our last episode.
The last episode. Which could appear in little segments.
Maybe we'll cut some in right here. Mm-hmm. Right here. Oh, maybe not.
No, we don't know.
We'll fix it in post.
Exactly.
I think of it though almost like when you see a YouTube video or something like that, or anyone can see this in modern times very easily, that you can see the timeline of a video. Like, you can see that all of these different frames are stacked on one another. And you can perceive time as being another spatial dimension, on this timeline. You just drag along this, and then it's like, oh, there's all of these moments on this timeline.
Yeah.
And I almost think about...
Or an old way to describe that would be if you had an old cinematic film strip. You have these different easy ways to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, like
the thumbnails of the different part of the movies.
Yeah. So if we were to see ourselves that way, we would almost appear like there's like a snaking, branching passage that goes all the way back to our mother's womb, and she goes back to her mother's womb, and etc. But in certain places,
eggs on. No, there's so many.
Certain places, in certain times, it coils up because of the intensity of the amount of time spent in a place. So if you were to just pace around in a room and you were to see all of those moments superimposed onto themselves, you would see just an immense amount of that person in that space.
True.
So I sometimes wonder if it's like, like where we're sitting right now, we're in a building, but 1,000 years ago, maybe the ancient Hawaiians were doing something on this very same space, and it's just a matter of where you put yourself on that timeline. So if we are in some kind of altered state of consciousness or altered state of perception and ability, we can somehow perceive across that timeline difference and somehow like see a glimpse of someone else in this same space.
Oh, well, we can access any of that. I mean, if you are familiar with the Akashic records, your soul records, you can do Akashic records for buildings, for lands. And, by opening that or doing an intentional practice with these records, you can access a lot of that. You can zoom into any lens. You can also do past life regressions if you hold those are different spiritual practices that allow you to tap into these different components. sometimes, depending on how open you are, you can have downloads about that. You meet somebody and then, I've had a couple partners who I have very vivid dreams. I'm like, oh, like, I don't know if this is a different timeline, but it's definitely our consciousness in different forms, and I'll have certain things that, become clear through those dreams, either about our interactions or about a way my body's interacting or aching or whatever, based on, that little glimpse that I get into that lifetime or that container of our consciousness. And it's cool to think about that of how, and, movies, I think will, there's a few movies out there that capture this concept, and it's such a groovy thing to be able to tap into, because it can teach us a lot about stuff. And it also just reminds us that time is infinite. I went to Del Arte International, which is a physical theater school up in Humboldt County. And one of the teachers there, Michael Phelps, he said, Michael Fields, not Michael Phelps. We were swimming everywhere, just a bunch of clowns in the water. Michael Fields, and Michael Fields, like, really, just a great professor. But we were talking about something, and he stopped. And he's like, "Time only exists, so everything doesn't happen at once." And so you imagine if you lifted yourself out of a timeline and, to the different things that you were talking about, of like where we were coiled and when we were not, when we were expanded, when we were contract, like, you want these separate little moments so that we can slow down and enjoy them. A week from now, I'm going to be like, man, I miss like sitting with Lex on the couch in Kauai and talking about all these things. And, I'll have a layer of nostalgia for this very moment. And, I've been trying more deliberately in my life to stop and have these moments of pause where I really absorb an environment so that I can come back to it in a memory, but in a memory in a way that I'm able to really almost relive it and feel it more. Which I guess kind of ties into like time travel movies and things, but like, and that's a cool thing that we have access to, like when we just remember to slow down and be like, oh, thank you, time, thank you, Father Time. Yes.
Thank you, Father
Time.
Yes.
That old guy.
Tell me a little bit about your past life regression experiences. What are some things that you would think of in terms of your past life experience?
Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few. I think the first one that I ever had, and I didn't have the terminology for it at the time, but I must have been like 11 or so, and I had a dream where I was in a tornado, and I got under a table and I was holding my baby. And again, I'm 11 years old. I don't have a baby, but I'm holding a baby, and I held the baby so tight that it suffocated. Which was a traumatic dream, a traumatic life, a traumatic dream to have as an 11-year-old. I didn't understand that. And then, fast forward 12 years, and suddenly I have an understanding that dream was about a past life. And I had a specific cousin who I always knew that dream was about. And when she was born, her for the first year or so of her life, I felt her and I really had a strong telepathic connection. And I would explain this to my very conservative Christian family, being like, I can hear her thoughts. Like, I know exactly what she wants. And they didn't entertain it. They didn't deny it either. They just let it be what it was. And now it's fun. That cousin, she has a baby of her own now, which is insane. But and I've never talked to her about the past life, but she now works with kids with Down syndrome and nonverbal autism. And I watched her have a nonverbal telepathic connection with one of the kids, and she wouldn't have been able to identify that directly, but I called her out on it, and she was actually very receptive, and her partner even more so, being like, yeah, I've seen her implement these gifts and and I was like, whoa, this is a very different conversation than would have happened 24 years ago when she was a baby. So, that's one little past life glimpse, I'd say is when I was deliberately doing that practice, or even ones that have come through other dreams as an adult, I had one partner who's a part of my soul activation, and I had multiple dreams with him where we were twins, and we were both Black in the South, like during slave times. And I've always been very sensitive around my neck. And in one of those dreams, I had a very visceral image of being hung and, swinging from a tree. And and that was very powerful. After I had that dream, and then I sent some healing energy to that time, my neck sensitivity went down quite a bit. It used to be somebody would come up and, just like to touch my shoulder, and I'd be like, ah! And a part of that was my dad would always tickle my clavicle too. But, that released so much, and that I felt a lot more free after that. So, those are two major ones. I had one that came through in a song, again, through another soul connection. And I wrote a song because I had just a waking image of a past life where he was pushing me on a swing in an apple orchard. So I wrote a whole song that was like, apple orchards, little schoolhouse. And, so there's you can use it as inspiration too, to just even reconnect to a time of your own consciousness. And I'm not like, some people get really into like, I was this, and it's just like, maybe I was tuning into somebody else's conscious. Maybe I didn't used to be a Black man, Yeah. To me, none of that matters. To me, it's just the experience of knowing that I'm bringing light to different components, whether it's my own soul's journey or our collective consciousness as a whole. I'm remembering things that are coming from places that, aren't typically tangibly grasped, and that sort of thing.
That's very interesting. Well, I've had some interesting things where I've been like, is this a past life thing, or is it what exactly am I experiencing? And especially I'm like hesitant to be like, oh, I was that person, that, like, especially if there's someone that's like notable.
Yeah.
But I felt in my life, I felt a very special connection. Maybe it's just from my name, because my name is Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
Lex is short for Alexander. And Alexander the Great is a very interesting Alexander of history. And, but I felt very specially connected with him, especially because I felt like I understood his story on a deeper level than other people did, which is he was born into a family that was very demanding of him in terms of wanting him to become a conqueror and leader. And he went forth and conquered what was to him the known world, and discovered that in doing so, he had really conquered nothing. He had not succeeded in doing any of what he had truly set out to do. He found that all of the people that had followed him, that he made very wealthy, powerful people, were ungrateful and were partially almost mutinous. And like, how much success could you go out and go get and achieve? So Alexander the Great went to, I'm kind of skipping around in his story. Alexander the Great at one point is visiting the great philosopher Diogenes of Sinope, and he's visiting him in, I believe, the city of Athens, or it was maybe the city of Corinth, but he was living in basically a wash tub turned on its side.
Been there.
And yeah, me too. So Alexander the Great comes and stands and wants to speak to the great philosopher. And Diogenes says, You're standing in my sunlight. Alexander the Great went on to say, if I was not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes, because that's a man who lives truly like he's living. Whereas the trappings of the throne and the trappings of the conquest and all that, Alexander the Great was more a prisoner, or more of a, he was not as wealthy or as powerful as Diogenes, who was living on the street and was called a cynic because he was like a canine, called a dog-like. Cynic means dog-like. And he was created as dog-like school because he was a dog-like man. So I internalized this, at least as a child, to think, I want to be a different kind of Alexander. Not Alexander that goes out and conquers the world, because clearly that didn't work the first time. So if I go out and do it again, I will just get there and then be disappointed in what I've accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll find that I haven't accomplished anything and nobody's grateful to me for any of it. They'll probably all hate me and resent me and be like, this asshole just like trampled all over us and took over everything, and now he's the king and we have to do what he wants, and like, who wants that? So there was a story about the birth of Alexander the Great and the birth about Gautama Buddha, and they both had a prophecy that was given about them before they were born. And both of them, their father was told, your son will either become the he will conquer the world. Either he will do it with spiritually or he will do it with militarily. And both of them tried to raise their son to be a military leader. Alexander the Great was a military leader, and Gautama Buddha was raised. His father was so afraid that he would learn that the world had these things in it, bad things, that he kept him in the palace, surrounded him with beautiful women and beautiful things, gave him everything that he wanted so that he would always have all the pleasures of life. And when Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, went out for the first time, went into the kingdom, he saw people for the first time. He saw the sick. He'd never seen sickness. He saw people dying, and he'd never seen dying people. And he saw a corpse, and he had never seen a dead person. He'd never seen any of those things. And that shook him so much. His father's intention to try to keep him from becoming a spiritual man, to try to keep him on a path of being a great ruler. He tried to form him into that. But ironically, that was what caused his great awakening, where he gave up his throne and he went out and lived as an ascetic monk and decided to pursue a different path and try to find a solution to all the suffering that he saw in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So these stories we're talking, in our larger arc of this, we're talking about the power of stories and symbols. these are some of the most powerful stories and symbols of my life that I just wanted to share with you, because you've taken the time to come and visit with me and share with me all of these wonderful ideas that you have.
Excellent.
And I'm very pleased that you've taken this time. So what further thoughts do you have?
Yeah, this has been a very full conversation. We've had lots of deep exchanges and kind of pinged all over the place.
We've traveled a long journey.
Yeah, I have two thoughts that are coming up, and one is just like my own personal like relationship with fairy tales, and those as powerful medicine stories, and tying it into current life, like, if some of the things that we've shared in our exchange today, you might not become a master at, being able to connect to your dreams right away, or to understand the symbology, or if you're trying astrology or telepathy or any of these things, or even just understanding stories and songs, and that's okay. I think the image that's been coming up for me a lot is that like moment when like the Disney main character like launches into their song, their ballad, and it's like, I can go the distance, or I am Moana, and and then right after the song is done, something comes and slaps them across the face. Right. So I feel like that's kind of a lot of this journey is so much of like you rise up into this higher places of awareness, and then you can get brought down momentarily so that you can like maintain equilibrium. And I just feel like throughout our conversation, I've even had moments of that, of like, whoa, like what plane of existence am I in? And so, just taking a moment to re-levelize anyone who's listening to this, and, make sure that you're feeling grounded and secure, and also, trusting the radiance of your heart to bring you further into the world.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing with me, and for sharing with all of us your ability to manifest story as a way to help people find themselves and find healing and find connection. And I'd just like to ask you, what kind of advice would you give to people who are creative or artistic and are living in this world where it's a bit of a struggle to be that? What kind of advice could you give to our audience, perhaps, about pursuing an authentic manifestation of your reality and making your dreams come true?
Yeah. First and foremost, as we were talking earlier, like be true with your word, set intentions, align with your goals, have friendships that keep you in integrity, and call you out on your BS. I think that's a large part of being a creator, because you can ping to these different places, and you need to be able to stay centered. I mean, I use the term acrobat of the light, and being able to do that is being able to roll to all the sides of duality until I have become an embodiment of all of it. So, as that comes to those who are seeking creative paths, or tuning into their spiritual journey, like, be creative with it, be playful, use those phrases when you fail, like, what a fool I've been, so that you're really engaging that deeper sense of play, so that you can, for me, my sun is Leo and my moon is Scorpio. So I've got, the depths and then like the brightest light of the astrology, or at least in some ways. And so, just be with the duality, because it's really all one. And I know a lot of artists struggle with depression or days of feeling quite low, or as you mentioned, like hypercritical. I struggle with that a lot. The more you can get out of your own way and just accept that your gifts are precious wherever they're at, and however you're taking steps to share your voice into the world is important. And take one little step every day. If you know you want to be a singer, but you're afraid of standing in front of an audience, sing to yourself on your screen, post YouTube videos, start to find the ways, especially in this world today. There's so many avenues and channels for us to share and express yourself. Get creative with what that looks like for you. I've even, why I'm in quiet, I always create like a little altar on the beach, and I make it out of the different heart-shaped coral that I find. And every time I just place this intention to bring more love into the world, bring more love into my life. And that is a creative act. Making a prayer is a creative act. So creating a wish, all of those things. A wish can be a simple step towards your thing every day. And of course, it's also listening to when you need to take action, and you can't stay in those places of fear. I think fear is one of our, there's the difference of being fearful and being fearless. And, playing with how we can be more, I lost the words for it, but yeah, just embody. In simple, just embody. And find a mentor if you're having trouble, somebody who can help coach or bounce ideas off of, or someone that you can really trust to help you start to seed your vision. And that could just be somebody who believes in you. It could be an expert in the field. It could be a teacher. It could be a friend. It could be a tree.
It could be a tree.
Yeah,
could be a tree. Sometimes the trees are our best friends.
They have a lot of insight. So.
They do, if you know how to listen.
It's true. So, yeah. Awesome.
Miss Hailey Jones, thank you so much for joining us. How can our audience find your work, and how can they get in touch with you or connect with you if they would like to do that?
Absolutely. You can always go to hihaileyjones.com. You can Google search me. I'm pretty Googleable. Gullible too. But or Instagram, Helium Jones, like helium, what's in a balloon. Those are all good ways. I have a couple YouTube channels, but those all things will find you. And if you can find me through those. Same with my contact information. If you want to hit me up and have a conversation, I'm always pretty open to just make a new friend and to have an exchange. I love learning about people. I love doing tarot readings. I love helping guide people through their creative journey, and helping them start their creative business is something I really love to help facilitate.
That's wonderful. And if you ever need to hire an elf,
snail, murder mystery, also all the creative stuff too.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is awesome.
Mahalo to you. Aloha kia kua.
Woohoo.
Aloha.
Aloha.